are live. Welcome to Digital Renegade Podcast. I'm your host, The Dashing Rogue, and I'm with my frequent sidekick, Artistic Layman.
What silences children? What if we invent a TV network for ages 6 to 11? That's insane.
Oh boy. And I'm with a guest of mine. He's a frequent guest on the show. He's a frequent viewer on the show. WolfMan Prepper. How are you doing?
Hey, how's the apocalypse treating you?
Well, it's actually treating me fairly well. I mean, we're actually having better weather. We've kind of started our cyberpunk dystopia. We had orange skies over here this last week. We actually had let's see if I could link it to you before we continue. But yeah, we had like Blade Runner levels of like smog, and it was actually quite beautiful, believe it or not, to see the orange skies with the neon lights.
Between the horrible coughing, we probably just look nice. But...
No, actually, believe it or not, it was fairly easy to breathe. I think I'm getting used to it, honestly, which is, I guess, like the new normal. But yeah, it was bad. Like, here you go, Luke. You could put this and play this. I don't think we're gonna get popped for the freaking. Yeah, you could play this in the link. But the reason I brought WolfMan Prepper on is because he's been in the prepping community, the survival prepper community, and I had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask. Most of it was going to relate to firearms, but some of it's going to relate to food and shelter, among other things. I really didn't focus too much on food, simply because I think a lot of people know how to survive. Like depending on your situation, depending on where you are at. Like I'm in this city, so I'm mostly focusing on storing up like canned foods, not necessarily focusing on, let's say, growing your own crops, because that's long-term prepping. What's up?
But yeah, well, in a city, it's a lot harder to grow your food anyway. So
yeah, I mean, we have our own little community garden, but that's not going to be there very long. You can't have a garden, I'd imagine, when society is breaking down. You'd have to have a territory first before you can start creating your own crops and stuff, I'd imagine. Is that correct?
Well, see, usually like strategies on prepping breaks down into two, which was bugging out or bugging in. And if you're in an urban environment and everything's just breaking down, I would try to get out to somewhere that's more stable. So it would be like you would gather food to stay as long as you need to, and then get to where you need to be. Because an urban center is basically propped up by the surrounding country around it, where everybody farms and produces at least the raw materials, and then it gets shipped in. And if things are breaking down, like even when we saw with the COVID, the supply lines were breaking down, cities are going to have a lot harder time getting food.
Right.
Without food, that's when people really start acting funny.
Right. So my question would be, when would you want to, like, since we're saying we're gonna just play a little bit by ear here, would you recommend people garrison themselves in like their apartment complex, or would you recommend them bug out, ideally, in this scenario?
Well, I guess we're going to focus more on like what's going on in the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I am kind of the mindset you kind of need to stay and defend your communities. But if you're in like a city and they're burning down a lot of buildings, you may want to just get out of there, because you may not have the ability to fight the fires, both literally and metaphorically.
Right.
Unless you've got enough people on your side. That's another small bit of this. Your chances of survival go way up if you have a adventuring party, so to speak.
That makes sense. I have a few people who I consider to be in my adventuring party, if that makes any sense. My personal strategy over here in California has been, if it starts getting bad, like really, really bad, put your back against the sea. Essentially go across the mountains and travel to the coastline, and then set up camp there and fish, basically. Use the natural terrain of like the sea, because let's be frank, you could probably fish and you could live off of abalone and things such as that if need be. Other than that, that would be my personal. That's what I would personally do. It would vary from place to place. Again, you're from. Do you mind telling us where you are? Do you care? Or if...
Yeah, I'm in the greater Appalachian area of Indiana. So like my environment's far more different than the environment you have to deal with. Like for example, I don't really bother with water preparation that much.
Right.
I have like 150 gallons of water just stored, ready to go. But there's literally a spring within walking distance of my house. All I have to do is boil the water, and I'm good to go.
Right. So on the topic of boiling water, um, would that, like, I've oftentimes been told just use bleach or use like chlorine tabs or something along those lines. But is boiling water a sure bet?
If you can boil water and you can boil it like hot enough and long enough, you're good to go. The chlorine and purification tablets, that's like a short-term thing. You don't really want to stick to it. Like chlorine will do most of the work, but you need to keep it diluted. That's like in your regular tap water. That's not a big deal. But like the tablets, that's a short-term, I have to purify this water now thing, and I don't really have any way of doing it.
Right.
But if you keep doing it, it'll actually like have a lot of adverse health effects. So it's not recommended for prolonged use.
Okay. Welcome, Beckloff. Yes, everyone, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. I have a life straw. Do you know what a life straw is? And if you do you have any recommendations for it? How do they work? Do they not work?
Oh yeah, the life straws are good products. Just you got to remember to like blow it back out because that membrane needs to be like cleaned. They do eventually wear out, but they're actually an excellent filtration system.
All right, that's good to know. I have a couple of those in my kit. I have one for my one in my car and one in my personal bug out bag. My question is, I actually have heard some contrary evidence when it comes to bug out bags. I've heard don't carry a bug out bag per se, because again, given the scenario, you might not be able to, like, you might very well have to bug in as opposed to bug out, or you might have to bug out like you have all medical supplies in one, and one would be for like earthquake kit, one would be for like fire kit, one would be for, shit hits the fan scenario. Do you have any thoughts for let's call it a standard adventurer kit, if that makes any sense? Would you recommend anything?
Okay, so the problem with your bug out bag is if you would have it on you when you need it. So my strategy is to bug in, and if I have to leave, it's kind of a short-term thing to go out and come back. I'm going to try to focus this more on what's going on in the country right now, because this is just such a vast topic and it covers different kinds of scenarios.
Okay, would you consider it would be more of a breakdown of society and law and order? Infrastructure may be working or not working. Would that be a fair assessment of the scenario we're describing?
Yeah. The thing to remember, though, is what you're most likely going to deal with is going to be some sort of short-term emergency. It's not going to be a long, drawn-out thing. Like this, with the rioting and the COVID lockdown, so that's probably the most prolonged we're going to see, unless, let's say, the commies actually somehow succeed and they take over the country. Then you're going to deal with food shortages and all the wonderful things communism brings. But I don't see that being as likely. So what you're going to want is basic necessities. Like you're going to want some food in case you do have to go somewhere. So you got some food on you to eat for the day. So like an MRE or something. And by the way, MREs do go bad. You can store them like just regular environment with temperature change for about like 2 to 5 years, depending on who made it. So you're going to want to swap that out every so often. Alternatively, you can get like backpacking dry store food. That'll last like a lot longer. It'll be anywhere between 10 to 25 years. I keep that in my backpack if I need to get out.
Luke, what is that? I'm sorry. I'm looking at the chat and I'm looking at what Luke is putting up. What is that? I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but legitimately, Luke, what is that?
It's an anime called Are You Lost? It's basically 4 girls stuck on an island, and every other episode is a survival technique.
And what would that be?
I think this was like capturing something and draining the liquid out for water.
Okay. Wolf, I don't know if that's a legit. I mean,
that's a bit extreme.
Yeah,
I would say.
they're trapped on an island, so they have to resort to extreme measures.
By the way, Bear Grylls popularized this. Don't drink your piss. You're not even making progress at that point. It's not worth it.
Yeah, don't.
If you've really got to, like, if you got a life straw, you could piss in something and collect it, and then drink through the life straw if you really had to, because it would filter it out. But don't drink it straight.
Yeah, I was gonna say you'd have to go Kevin Costner and Waterworld on that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, like shows like Bear Grylls and like it's I guess you'd say the prepper community at large a lot of times want to like Hollywoodify it. The truth is, a lot of prepping is really boring, mundane shit. Like when you go grocery shopping, buying an extra can of something you'll eat and then just putting that back rather than just on top of your regular grocery shopping. That's actually a great way to start building up food stores. And it's little minor things like that, or like keeping a can at your house of like some extra gasoline, stuff like that. It's not really like, a lot of people like to emphasize your gear, and gear is great, don't get me wrong. You want good gear, but it needs to be useful gear, durable gear, and what needs to come first is the knowledge you gain and retain for your environment. So a simple skill, like we were talking about boiling water earlier, is to know the various methods for starting a fire and actually like practicing them and then retaining that knowledge to keep with you. So if you do need to start a fire to cook or to boil water or whatever, you have that ability.
Okay. So one of the ways and maybe correct me if I'm wrong about this, I'm going to just, I guess go through a bunch of stuff that I've learned, in this case, to start a fire. One way I've learned is to get some aluminum foil of some kind and, connect the battery end to the positive end, and then it will start a fire, essentially. Is that something that you can do?
I've never used tin foil. I have used steel wool. Like steel wool and a 9-volt battery will actually ignite the fine pieces of iron, and they'll drop onto what you're trying to start a fire. In that respect, by the way, like some pocket lint, if you have enough of it, or dryer lint in a little ball to catch your spark, is actually a great way to start a fire. I use that method with flint and steel.
Yeah, I have a flint and steel.
Yeah, I actually have a little can that I keep just a little bit of dryer lint with. So if I go camping, I can just pull the dryer lint out, build my structure for my fire, and then put it in there and collect the spark, and then it'll catch, and then I can build the fire up.
You spoke about getting types of gear, but mostly the techniques you're talking about. I've heard this was referring to guns and like firearm gear, like not just guns, but necessarily, but like certain types of like whether it be earring protection, gun belts, backpacks, whatever. It's often been said, and maybe I'm incorrect about this, but it's a buy once, cry once sort of policy. Would you say that's true, or?
Right. So there's two strategies when it comes to like building up, I guess what you'd call your duty gun. And here's the thing. The thing about guns is they're a tool. So when you go hunting, there's one type of gun. Your gun you carry for self-defense is usually a small handgun. They're not always fun to shoot. They have a lot of recoil. But their main point is to be small and light, so you carry them every day. Mm-hmm. So there's different kinds of tools. Now, there are some guns that you can kind of cheat it. Like if you got an AR and a sufficient caliber, a lot of people actually use those for hunting. I know the line is they're not for hunting, but they actually are pretty popular for hunting. So you could actually get around. You can actually build yourself you can't anymore because there are no ARs on the shelves. There's not even parts available, really. You could build like an all-around AR that would be good for both hunting and self-defense, and it would be light enough you could backpack with it. So that's actually kind of my recommendation. I'm not really a big AR guy, but because they're so modular, you can develop a setup that would be ideal for your situation. Mm. And a lot of this is environmental dependent. Like I have a totally different environment than where you are, for example. Right. So the skills you're going to need are different than what I'm going to need.
Right. Okay. So I guess the question is, how would one come to determine what environment they're in? Like, obviously, it's not snowing where I'm at; everything's on fire. In fact, but given, let's say I'm in a temperate climate, like how would one perceive their environment that they're in? Like, should someone say we're in a temperate environment? We're in a, like you said, you're in like in the Appalachia, right? So
Yeah, the Greater Appalachians.
right. So you're in a forest area, I would
I'm
imagine.
in a I'm in a temperate, what they consider a temperate zone. Indiana's kind of got really weird weather in that we're kind of in a bowl shape most of the state, so moisture just collects here, and we have really high humidity. Like, I know several people who have successfully grown bananas and pineapple plants,
Wow.
and actually produced it. The only thing that kills off the tropical plants is our winter, which can be harsh. They've been kind of mild the last few, except for one. But winter's the big knockout punch here. Otherwise, most of the year there's plenty of like food you can find just foraging in the woods or hunting. One minor note about hunting: if there's like a prolonged breakdown of society, which I don't actually see as being very likely, everybody's plan is to hunt, so game is going to be depleted very quickly. I would say you're better off if you've got areas you can fish to fish, except for in my location, fishing is so popular, the state has built a very large hatchery to make sure that we don't deplete the fish population. So in my case, I say if it's meat and it's wild, there's probably not going to be a lot of it left if things break down. So you're going to have to learn how to farm.
Okay. Because I know how to fish, and my father taught me how to fish as a child. We used to go fishing all the time. I didn't catch much, but at the same time, I've caught a few here and there. Again, you can find stuff online how to clean a fish properly. I know you have to take out its guts. You have to rip out its. I guess it's. I would say there's a certain way you could fillet a fish. You could look it online. Other than that, so we covered. Let's say we covered the area that you're in. You need to have survival skills to survive. What would you like? Again, going back to the whole standard adventure kit. Like, what would you recommend for like an everyday carry in this particular day and age with riots, civil unrest, and in my case, rolling blackouts, orange skies, smoke, and what have you?
All right, so I boomer carry. I carry a 1911 and 45, even though I'm below 40. And it used to be, I would say, that didn't matter because most engagements that you would be in, the gun isn't fired at all, or if it is, you could get the job done in very few rounds, so you didn't need like 15 rounds and then some. But with all the rioting now, I would recommend a handgun that has a standard capacity of at least 12 or more rounds and at least a backup mag.
Right.
With the way everything's going, you may actually need all those bullets. Hopefully not, but when you're dealing with a mob, they're not reasonable people. You can't really talk them out of things. If it's one-on-one, a lot of times your attacker, upon seeing you draw your weapon, will just leave. But in a mob, they don't necessarily do that.
We've spoken before about, I think you said something along the lines, and I think we said this privately. I'm not entirely sure if I remember this, but a handgun or a gun in general can only hold off 10 people. Can you elaborate on what you said about that?
Okay, so I don't know how much water it holds today, but they went through and they did a study. They didn't actually put people in this scenario. They went through like bank robberies.
Who's they by chance?
Some psychological, I don't know what you call them. They're psychologists. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
They went through like things that they had documents, like footage and stuff of like bank robberies and hostage situations, and they basically studied the behavior, and they concluded that one handgun, like one person with a gun, can basically control 9 people. But once you get over that number, somebody's going to try to like disarm you or attack you or something.
Right.
So,
okay.
But I don't know if that would apply in mob mentality. Something I've seen, like there's a guy that he did when the riot started in Minnesota. guy got busted into a police car and took the rifle out of it, and then the guy disarmed him and took it away from him. But what he actually did was he blended into the mob, and they kind of ignored him. Like he did the chants, he did the body language, and that allowed him to move around the crowd pretty freely.
Right.
There's something called gray manning, where basically you just have the look. There's like different clothes recommendations, but what it is it's like what people look like. So if your area is a bunch of hipsters with like sandals on their feet, just dress like them, but on they act like them, and you can blend into a large crowd, and people will kind of just ignore you.
Right.
And that'll give you free movement.
Okay, so I have an example of gray manning. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but Luke, can you play this? And this is sort of like me kind of being joking, but at the same time, I think it's probably the best way to describe what a gray man scenario would be in a riot scenario. Luke, can you play it and keep the you'll have to.
What is this?
You can either slow it down or speed it up. It's all good. Here you go. This is from the Brendan Fraser movie from the 1990s, or the tail end of the 90s, for The Mummy. Yeah, here we go. Play it. I can't hear it, Luke. Is that sort of what you're... Would that be something you're basically talking about, Mr. Wolf? Is that?
Well, all you really got to do is look and act like them for the most part, and then people will just assume you're one of them. So if Black Block's going through and you want free movement, if you're dressed like them and you say the stupid chants they say, a lot of them will just assume you're with them. Yeah, like what he's doing. Just
all right.
Most of it's acting, by the way. You can actually get away with not looking the part so much if you can act the part. But looking the part also helps you blend in even more. It defers suspicion, and that's actually a skill. You can try that out. Actually, like say there's like a party going on or something that you're just not invited to, like a street party. You can like dress like them and then see if you can slip in and see if people will notice you or not. Because worst case scenario, they notice you're not invited, and you go, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought it was fun or something." I just show up, and then you just leave awkward. But that's actually a nice skill to have.
Okay. And on the topic of ammunition, would you recommend currently in this state of being given the ammunition shortages? Because I know have you heard about this ammunition shortage?
How have I not heard of this ammunition shortage?
Right. It's affected you, I assume, right?
It's affected everywhere. Like guns are all right here in Indiana. I kind of jokingly tell people we make Texas look like a deep blue New York County. Mm-hmm. But like even here, where it's just assumed you had a gun, we went through like the waves of people buying a gun for the first time, and the ammo here, unless you're shooting like 308. 6.5 Creedmoor or 30-06, you pretty much can't get ammo. I mean, some of the bigger gun stores have like all the oddball stuff that they have like built up in hunting calibers and stuff. Mm-hmm. But as far as new production, most of what I see on the shelf, aside from the occasion, sometimes they get lots of handgun ammo. Like 45, I've actually been able to get, but I can't be picky on what kind of bullets I get. They just have like so much of it, and it's just whatever they can get. But if you have like a bigger rifle in 30-06, 308, 6.5 Creedmoor calibers like that, you can just get ammo for it. And I think that's because most of those guns start at like $1,000 or $2,000, and the ammo is already super expensive on top of that. So that's kind of why I think it shows up. In fact, when you were telling me about the gun you bought, I first thought you were getting a M1 Garand and not the Mini 30.
Yeah, I got my personal gun that I picked up, and actually, believe it or not, it runs relatively well, reliably. I just had to, before I went out to the range, I greased her up and I oiled her up, and I oiled and lubed her up, and then I went out there, shot up a bunch of magazines. I shot 100 rounds through it, and it's still no jams, nothing. I don't know. I think it's pretty reliable as long as you treat it relatively, as long as you lube it up, and you're a 1911 owner from what I understand. So could you talk about reliability when it comes to firearms? I know that there are a lot of differences between polymer and, let's say, metal framed revolvers when it comes to dependency and like care lightweight and what have you. Is there anything you could say in regards to like what people should purchase for their first handgun or first gun in general? Like for my personal self, I fired a Glock. I couldn't fire it properly because it was so light that I kept, limp wristing it. But when I fire a 1911 or a metal gun like a Beretta M9, I'm fairly, I could fire it actually because I don't limp wrist it because it's heavy enough for me.
Right. So this is one of those hard to answer subjects. Normally, I would say if you're completely new to guns, for like a handgun, I would say a Glock. I really don't like Glocks. In all truthfulness, Glocks aren't really that great. They're the Honda Civic of guns. They are very reliable, but they're not super great out of the box. You basically got to mod them. Nowadays, honestly, I would see what kind of ammo is regularly available where you live, and then look online for the most reliable gun you can obtain in that cartridge, just so that you can supply it. Because if you're late to the game and you haven't built up a supply of ammunition already, you're going to have to get what you can get, basically.
Okay.
So, but like, if you're more experienced, that's one of those things where I really don't have to answer it because you probably watched a bunch of reviews, you know what you like, what you can operate, and you've probably got some ammo supply already.
Right. And that being said, what type of ammunition? Oh, how much ammunition should you have in an ideal situation, given the circumstances of riots? I'm of the opinion that if I ever see a mob coming, I'm running, or hunkering down until they pass, assuming they're not after me per se.
All right. So the answer on how much ammo you should have is you can never have enough ammo.
Okay.
That's pretty much the long and short of it. So, like, a saying I go by, and a channel I'll recommend is like Mr. Guns and Gear. He reviews things, and he'll go into other topics. So, when it's cheap, stack it deep. When it's high, you let them buy. So, me and my friends, most of our stuff's kind of oddball anyway. So, we would order like 1,000 round case, and then we would split it in half, and that's how we would divide the cost.
Right.
Of any caliber we have. That's not really so much an option right now because the demand is so high right now that ammo if it's a common caliber, it's just gone about as soon as it gets on the shelf.
Right. I've actually had some relative luck picking up ammunition for my M1 carbine. I like it because like you can get 100 rounds of not 226. What is it? 100 rounds of 22 LR fairly easily, and there's lots of that. But at the same time, where I'm at in California, I can only have 10 rounds in the magazine unless I break the rules. So that being said, I oftentimes buy 10 round magazines of 30 caliber carbine. And it has stopping power, because that's the main thing when it comes to, at least for me, does stopping power matter? Like, I know that, there's a lot of Call of Duty kids out there saying, oh, you got to get the 45, you got to get the 44 Magnum, deals more damage. From my personal experience, I've seen that guns are not powerful, humans are fragile. What would you recommend for, as a caliber for survival purposes?
All right. So, caliber is one of those things that does and doesn't matter. So there's like a certain point calibers become effective, and after that, it's more about shot placement. And really, any gun, you need to know how to use it. And before I forget on this subject, on reliability, 90% of your reliability is cleaning. So make sure you have a cleaning kit for your gun that you can carry with you and maintain it and lubricate it. Because seriously, most malfunctions is just not properly cleaning your gun and lubricating it.
Okay.
That's a note I have to. But like, I have a Webley in a caliber called 38-200, which is just a heavy 38 Smith & Wesson. I'm not going to use that for self-defense. I'm not going to use that unless I'm really desperate, because that round is a very weak round. That was a round developed when black powder was the mainstay.
Ooh.
So even though I could, in theory, take a human being down with it, it was the doctrine at the time was when you pull your handgun, you unload the entire handgun into somebody.
Ah.
Because that handgun caliber is not very suited. So for a handgun, my cutoff point is 380. I'd recommend 9mm or up. But that said, what's more important is being able to deliver your shots on target and in the vital areas. And if you can do that, your caliber does not matter so much. Like, there have been people who have been shot and killed with 22 long rifle.
Right.
Because they get hit in the heart. So that's, like I said before, everybody likes to talk up gear, but what's more important is your skills. You can have the best gear in the world, but if you can't use it properly, it doesn't matter.
Okay. So currently right now in California, we're in lockdown, and there are a lot of businesses that are shut and closed because they are non-essential. However, certain businesses here, such as I would say like Home Depot, Target, grocery stores, and like Albertsons and different places that you would normally think of when you go to do your everyday shopping are open. However, certain businesses like my card shop that I go to play my games, and electronic stores are closed or at limited hours and spaces, but so is the rifle ranges. They're on a reservation only schedule. How often would you recommend somebody train with their firearm? And given the situation that people don't have to choose between picking ammunition or picking training, what would you recommend? There are two questions there, I should say.
Yeah. So normally I would say practice as often as possible, but that's not really something you can do given the ammo shortage or where you're at, where things are locked down. Now, there are several companies that will make what they call dry fire training, and I used to poo-poo this, but given the fact that ammo's at a premium and you probably can't build large supplies of it right now, I would actually recommend ordering one of these dry fire training systems. There's various systems. I just look them up on YouTube. If you start watching gun videos, I'm sure the ad will start coming up.
So would you recommend in this case people just watch YouTube? And
oh, excuse me. Actually, I actually do have some channels to recommend at the end of this to start like getting some knowledge on it. But like the dry fire training systems, it's not going to get you prepared for the recoil of the gun cycling, but it's going to help you as far as getting your aim correct and your trigger break down. Given the fact you can't get a lot of bullets or maybe go outside, that's something you can do at home in your house.
Right.
Make sure your gun is unloaded. That sounds dumb that people have to be reminded that, but yeah, make sure it's unloaded and follow the instructions of whatever system you end up getting. If you can't go out and shoot. Like, I can still go out and shoot because I have lots of ammo to do that, and I live in a rural environment. So even if we were locked down, quote unquote locked down like we were, I can still go out and practice because I have plenty to do that, and I live in an area where I can do that. But barring that, I would recommend like a dry fire training system.
So we've covered types of ammunition that are available, and I assume that you've recommended 9mm to people because of its plentiful supply and what have you.
Well, it's theoretical plentiful supply, yeah.
Theoretical, yes, of course. I mean,
normally you can get like buckets of 9mm for not a lot of money.
Right.
But now, given the ammo shortage, everybody has 9mm. Like, I've got something in 9mm. All my buddies have something in 9mm.
I don't. I should probably pick one up then.
If you can. I've been able to get 45, but 45 it's always kind of been on the more expensive side, and it's been falling out of favor. I'm not sure how the rush to buy guns is going to change that, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to hear about the mythical 45, and it may come back up. But right now, I would probably prioritize based on what kind of ammo is available in your area.
Would you recommend people focus on one particular firearm in particular? If, let's say, I have an assortment of firearms to choose, because I know there are going to be people who have the money, and I don't have the money, for instance, but there are going to be people who have like the ability to spend $5K in one purchase, buy, let's say, one gun, one handgun, or two or three handguns, and one rifle. What would you recommend would you recommend they train and get competent with one particular firearm as opposed to another? Or multiples?
Right. So if you're a first-time gun owner, I would recommend that you would get possibly one rifle, one handgun, or a shotgun and a handgun, and be competent in a few versus having a lot. Because getting back to, the gear hype part of this, your training matters way more than getting the gear. Yes, you want good quality gear, but you need to have the skills to use it. So I would recommend getting something that is reliable and sticking to that and training with it until you're competent before moving on.
Okay.
And that's doubly important if you're, on the poorer side.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm honestly at this point sacrificing my food budget for ammunition. And that's mostly due to the fact that everything is so damn expensive, and everything that I have personally spent. Well, again, cost of living is going up, and at the same time, you have to save for God knows what they're going to throw at us next. Because it is, yeah, I know.
My fear is, and I think Beckloff is right on this, is that they're probably going to roll out a horrendous police state. Because, right, so one of the things Hitler did was he actually defunded the police, and then he sent his brown shirts around to go around and terrorize people. And that actually helped create the support necessary to, police state Germany.
Ah.
So, where I live, people here are just naturally anti-authoritarian. It's kind of the Hoosier way. And when rioting started, it just was not tolerated at all. And when there was any George Floyd protest, people like militia would just show up, and people's right to speak was recognized. We're I'm hesitant to say libertarian because it doesn't really mean what it used to, but we're actually a three-party state, and libertarians do sometimes get elected, although they usually just run under the Republican ticket. So people were allowed to speak, but people were very clear that property damage and people being attacked was just not going to happen. So, right. We'll ignore laws if we don't agree with them, and we're not afraid to strike back against the police if we deem it necessary. So where I live, I don't think we're going to get much authoritarianism on the state level. It could still pass.
Okay.
But I see the country at large. I see people welcoming an overbearing police state with open arms. And that's going to be, I think, the real test coming up. Because short term, you're going to have to deal with shortages, chaos with the rioting and so forth, and the attacks. Long term, I think we're going to have a government problem, so to speak.
Right. I've spoken about it before. We talked about how it's going to be Blade Runner or cyberpunk dystopia. I think it's going to be something similar to how the coastal regions will be more authoritarian, like the East Coast, but also in some cases the West Coast.
But you guys kind of already are, aren't you?
Well, I don't think we're totally again, I have the ability to leave the county. I have the ability to go place to place. There aren't any checkpoints per se. I mean, I guess my question is, again, I don't know what you mean by authoritarian. I mean, are we going to have papers, please? No, I don't think we're not there yet. We might be. But we're not, again, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably at a 6 right now. As opposed to you, I would imagine you're at a 3, maybe a 2 when it comes to.
Well, I think they're going to implement as much authoritarianism as people will allow and help enforce.
Mm-hmm.
because when Indiana locked down, a lot of people just packed their bags, went camping and fishing because the businesses weren't allowed to work. And of course, big businesses are just going to comply. You know, you'll get various levels of complying on small businesses, but there wasn't anything to do. A lot of people didn't have any work, but rather than just staying at home and shelter in place, a lot of people ended up just going out and doing their normal recreation anyway. So I think our governor, who he thinks because he's the governor, he gets to make all the choices for the plebs like me in the state. I think he learned really quick into this that Hoosiers just don't really care for authority and will do whatever.
Right.
But in a lot of places in this country, people were helping to enforce the lockdown. So I think it's going to vary all across the country.
It will vary onto the culture of the region, which is one of the reasons I think we're not going to have, you know, Blade Runner or Cyberpunk future. We're going to have, dare I say, Serenity or Firefly. We're going to have the Alliance, and then we're going to have the brown coats, so to speak. If that makes any sense. Where we'll have people who just want to be left alone and do their own devices. It'll be a bit more libertarian. It'll be a libertarian versus authoritarian. And you'll have people who are, you know, gay, straight, you know, people who will say, you know, I just want to be left alone. Don't bother me. I won't bother you. You mind your business and I'll mind mine. Versus people who want to make people better, if that makes any sense. Literally in the sense of like being better, like health, but also better in the sense of, you know, moral and virtue signaling and what have you. Would you say that's something that you see in the future, or?
Yeah, we see, well, Tim Pool calls it moral policing. And I see this kind of on the right too, but it's mostly on the left with their quote unquote moral authority. Like they're going around and forcing people to like say that they're racist and stand with Black Lives Matter and do the chants and stuff. And to a lesser extent, I see that kind of catching on in the right. You know, people have literally been shot in the street by communists for supporting President Trump, but then there's people on the right who are hyper worried about like people masturbating to Japanese cartoons and want like bans and stuff.
Right.
Which I don't think is they're not prioritizing things correctly, if you ask me. So, you know,
right.
I see a scenario in the future in which, provided there's no shenanigans, and there probably will be shenanigans, where the Republicans just win hands down because the Democrats have allied with the insane left. But then they'll build up this big police state apparatus, not actually use it, and then they'll take up something stupid like trying to ban porn and in the process killing free speech, and then they'll piss a bunch of people off. And then in 4 years, the Democrats rise to power again. And now they have this big apparatus they could go around and punish and beat people that don't support them.
So essentially they'll build up the infrastructure, and that very same infrastructure could be used to push an agenda. Luke, this is Tim Pool and that whole satanic tranny girl, right? Who was running for mayor of New Hampshire, or the sheriff of New Hampshire, right?
Yeah,
you hear about this?
Yeah, ran as a Republican with the phrase with the phrase "F the police."
Oh man, this is some weird shit. I mean, this is like getting into like D&D Blood War territory. We have devils versus demons, and it's all on the order versus chaos axiom.
Of course, he's running against a long-time incumbent, so it's probably not going to happen.
Well,
I heard it was like absurdism, where like they were doing it just to show that like they can win just by having an R after their name.
I don't know, honestly. And even then, these people are the type of people who, well, again, they're ethical egoists. They're the people who will lie to you to your face if it benefits them, and they don't think about morality per se. They're very pragmatic in that regard. So oftentimes you can never get a straight answer from them. So I guess my next question would be, when it comes to ammunition, quality over quantity. Would you name any brands that you would recommend, like Remington or Wolf, like Wolf Performance? I've seen a lot of people buy Wolf Performance. I'm looking at one of my local gun shops, which I have another question to come up. Buy local or buy close? Buy local or buy online? What would you recommend for people?
Okay, actually, I have something interesting. So most of the people who are first-time gun owners right now, you're not in reloading. So, like, you don't have any reloading presses or anything, I assume.
I can go get it at Bass Pro, and I've picked up some of my 30 caliber carbine brass because I knew that was going to be valuable soon. At this point in the game, anything that is broken, like I have a broken iPhone right here, and it still works. Everything works, but I just need to get different components for it. I fix. I don't just discard anymore.
Well,
So
reloading is not really an option right now anyway, because you can't really get primers because the companies that make them can't keep up with demand.
Okay.
But most people who aren't reloading, I would actually recommend, if you can do it in your state, I know yours has a ban on buying ammo online. You can still get Wolf ammunition, Brown Bear, their entire lines of various quality, and still get them in like 500 round boxes. But it's all steel case, so it's not reloadable, but it's made off in Eastern Europe, and the factories are cranking out tons of this stuff, and you can still buy like 500 round boxes online. Like a site I use is SG Ammo. They have a rotating supply right now, but I would watch whatever caliber you got. I would watch them and see if they have your caliber, and just order like 500 round boxes. I'm not sure if they have a limit. I think they do.
What I'm looking at right now on my particular well, actually, go ahead and continue. My bad.
But like, as far as quality versus quantity, like right now there's not really a luxury. So unless like there's known problems with the ammunition where it's not going to cycle the gun, or it's just so low quality that it's garbage basically, right now I'm kind of in the opinion of get what you can get right now without like paying super wild prices.
Okay.
If you had the luxury, then like I would maintain a supply of quality ammunition that you would actually use for duty, but then practice with the cheaper stuff, because you're just practicing. So you don't need like super high performance precision ammo just to put holes in paper.
Right. Because I guess my question then becomes, because I got into guns in this particular in this pandemic, again, I wanted to prior to this, but I did, I personally think that the only reason I got a gun, I was allowed to get a gun, is because Gavin Newsom wants the world to burn, and he thinks I'm going to help do that. So I guess my question is, what does cheap ammo even look like? Because they keep talking about the new normal when it comes to COVID regulations. I want to know what cheap ammo looks like, because I'm going to read off some lists of prices, and I'm going to read off. I'm going to keep this particular gun shop anonymous. I'm just going to read off some things, and maybe you can say, is it reasonable? Is it not reasonable? MagTech it's MagTech First Defense Justice 45 Auto Plus P 165 grain hollow point 20 rounds $30. Would you say that's a good purchase?
That's about $10 to $15 over normal price.
Okay.
And that's defense ammo, so it's going to be manufactured in smaller batches anyway. So I would say that it's reflecting demand currently.
Okay, so then we'll go on to something a bit more. Okay, so here's Wolf Performance. 7.62 by 39 millimeter. That's the Soviet AK-47 round, or SKS for those of you who want to use clips or stripper clips. 1,000 rounds steel case. It was $400. Now it's $349.99. Would you say that's a good price?
For buying in person, that's about the going rate. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Not all these Eastern Bloc countries did like the lockdown stuff. They did precautions.
Right.
So a lot of the factories that make Wolf and stuff like 7.62 by 39, they're still in full production, and they don't have like a big base to buy in Europe. So I'm an AK guy. I can still get like tons of ammunition right now.
Okay, speaking of AK versus AR, would you recommend an AK or AR given situations for first gun buyers when they're looking for a rifle of some sort?
Not for first time gun buyers. That kind of pains me because I am an AK person. But the quality in AK manufacturing varies so much from producer to producer that you have to do a lot of research beforehand to get a decent rifle for the price you're willing to pay versus an AR that's just a commodity at this point. Glocks and all Glock knockoffs are like, it's a commodity. It's a known base quality. You may not get super high-end performance, but there's a guaranteed base level of quality you're going to get when you buy one of those platforms versus an AK where there are manufacturers out there that aren't very good, like IO, where the block the front trunnion was actually made out of cast material. And there actually is a way to do that where it will hold up, but they weren't doing it, and those guns would eventually just fail catastrophically. And I haven't heard of anybody getting hurt from it, but they will fail. And a gun like an AK, they're expensive to produce, but if they're done right, they will last like 20,000, 50,000 rounds. I've heard of them going up to 80 with a barrel swap.
Wow.
So, and that's like military machine gun stuff. So
right.
They're meant to last. They're expensive to produce, but they're supposed to last. And like there are companies that are making them out there where they're not. And actually, an American-made company, if you can get one, I'll throw it out there. PSA. Originally, they had some issues with their guns. It is something you want to look at in person if you can. And about the only way to do that right now is at a gun show. Actually, if you want to get a gun and some ammo, my advice is to go to like your smaller gun shows because traffic is less on them. And a lot of times those are people who do gun sales on the side or as a hobby. And a lot of them are older gentlemen who do not know how to use the internet, so their supply is not going to be completely gone. So you'll be able to pick stuff up there that you won't be able to normally.
Okay, so gun shows would be the time to go get the equipment then.
Yeah, if you're having them in your area, especially if they're close, a lot of times there's a small entrance fee. They'll ask you if you have a gun, and that's because a lot of people will come there to sell theirs to a vendor, or they're carrying one on them and they need to be checked. Like a lot of them have a policy where they have to have all the guns unloaded, and that's just a safety thing.
Right.
But you will go in there and there'll be accessories, there'll be novelties, and there'll be like knife vendors and stuff, and you get things there that you may not be able to normally get.
Okay, so I'm looking at. I guess it would be. It was. Let's see if I can find it here. It was PSA AK-47. Would you say is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, PSA. They're a domestic manufacturer. They had issues early on, but they have seemed to have worked almost all of them out. Their quality control is still kind of iffy, so it is something that you want to try to inspect in person if you can. But given the situation, you can't even order online and have it shipped to an FFL anyway at this point. So I would visit your local gun shows. And if you see one and you want to go to AKs over ARs, inspect it. A channel I recommend that has a video on how to find a quality AK is AK's Operators Union.
Okay.
He's actually he's a Polish guy who immigrated to the United States. He even has torture tests. So he's got a lot of videos on various ammo manufacturers, and he takes them up to 5,000 rounds. And if he approves it, it's officially Slav approved. And its quality. So he knows AKs. He also has some interesting videos he does once in a while about the current politics in the area, because he came out of the tail end of communism. He was a little boy when it was around. So they're not common, but they're if you want to get his opinion on some things, I'd go through his channel and look at those videos too.
I definitely shall. That's pretty good. Thank you for the recommendation. One of the things, another shotgun ammunition. Here's another ammo. Again, we're keeping these people anonymous. Black Aces Tactical Buckshot, 12 gauge, 250 rounds of ammunition, It would be one case technically, so that's 10 boxes, but it's 250 rounds, shot shells, $280. Would you say that's a good high, low, just right?
Shotgun ammo is always more expensive,
Hmm.
and I'm not like as well versed in like the cost versus value on it.
Okay.
If things were normal, the brands I would recommend is S&B, because you can get like 25 round boxes for around like $1-ish a shell. That's usually the $1 to $2 basically per shell of buckshot, depending on the quality, is kind of the going range. Rio Buck is actually like, it's considered trash European ammunition, but it's actually like their buckshot's actually really good for the price. I don't know if you can get it right now. Like on shotgun ammo, things like buckshot and slugs are really expensive versus like birdshot, which you can get tons of. But I don't recommend birdshot for self-defense because people have been shot point blank in the face with it and survived.
Well, I mean, they survived, but are they out of the game or are they still like ready to go?
They're in lots of pain, but they're going to recover, kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like if you get shot in the face, yeah, you're not going to be happy, and especially if you get it in the eyes.
Oh boy.
But
Yeah.
people like birdshot isn't really something that'll take down a human being. Like there's an asterisk there. There is a method called cut shells, which I don't really recommend because it can be kind of dangerous to the gun and thus you. But there
Right.
is a way to, like, if in a pinch, you can do what's called cutting your shell. And this came about during Depression when there was like really strict hunting laws because they were worried about people killing off all the deer. So you couldn't buy slugs in many areas.
Right.
And what they would do is they'd take a knife and they would cut around the hole and weaken it. And then when they shot it, the whole top of the shell would break off of the shotgun, or off the shotgun shell, go down the barrel, and it would act like a slug.
Okay.
And that's one of those skills that I think is, and knowledge I think is good to have. I don't recommend doing it unless you're desperate, though.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Let's talk body armor, because I know that there are a lot of people here in California who want us to ban body armor. I have personally picked up AR 500 body armor through Spartan Armory. However, given or Spartan Arms, I guess you could say it was called. When I said that to the gun store owner, he's like, "Oh, like it was just like, oh." I'm like, "Oh, is that a bad thing?" He says, "Yes." Uh, I've heard of this issue called spalling. Spalling is essentially when the bullet hits the armor, it absorbs into the armor, but at the same time that energy has to go somewhere, so it spreads out and it can hit you in your groin, your arms, and your jugular. Would you recommend people who have the money to purchase armor, should they do it, or should they just spend the money on the ammunition and training and guns and what have you?
All right, so armor. Unless you're in like a militia, you don't necessarily need it. Unless your plan is, this is my town, I'm going to stay here and help defend it, you don't necessarily need it, because otherwise you're not going to be wearing it all the time anyway. But if you're going to get armor, most people do get steel because the steel does not expire within your lifetime. We're talking like hundreds of years. The weak point to steel, though, is the spalling. So at those speeds, lead and copper basically just act like a fluid. So they kind of hit the armor, and even though they don't go through, they kind of splash. Like AR 500 has an anti-spall coating, and it's good for most calibers for center hits, at least like a few goes, but eventually that coating fails. A way to get around that is a lot of companies like Spartan, for example, make a sleeve that the plate can slip into, and it's a jacket that goes around it. So when that coating eventually fails, it'll catch the spalling. And that's a way to upgrade that armor, and that's probably the most effective way to upgrade that armor at cost, and like now that those coats are Kevlar, so they will eventually expire themselves, but they're usually really cheap, so you can keep replacing them a lot more than like if you had the money. I would recommend like a ceramic or even the new polymer stuff because it's so lightweight. And if you do get armor, you want to make sure they're the same weight front and back. I don't know what you have. Do you have like a backpack plate?
I have a front plate, a side plate, and a back plate. There is one issue for my personal use. I have a swimmer cut, not a shooter cut, and it only covers my upper torso. My gut hangs out. So I mean, yeah, there's nothing. I could get shot in the belly, and it will hurt, but I won't die. I'd imagine because there's no vitals essentially.
Gut shots, if you can get to the hospital in time, they're usually not as deadly. The point of armor is to protect you from immediate death. It's not to protect you from like death in a hole. I guess is a bad way of saying it. It's for like making sure, yeah, you don't just get one shotted and then you're dead.
Saving throw.
Yeah, it's meant to protect you. And if they hit your plate and it stops it, you may be just totally fine except for a bruise. But it's meant to save your life in the immediate threat, and then you get out of there. Basically, it's not meant to be like a prolonged thing. It's not like in movies or games or in tabletop where your armor is just like a shield against all damage.
Right.
It's meant to save you from immediate death, and then you resolve the situation or get to a hospital or whatever need be.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm trying to think of anything else I have to ask because let's see, how long have we been going? We've been going for let's see if I can
hour and a
find it
half.
here. An hour and a half already? Wow.
Or a little, actually, technically an hour, but yeah, it's because started a little late.
Okay. All right. Let's see what else I have. These are more personal questions. Let's see if I could. What was your first gun that you've ever owned?
The first gun I ever bought myself would be a Polish Tantall, which is a variant of the AK-74 platform. Not the 47 platform, the 74. It's a slightly updated version.
Right.
The first gun I ever had myself was a 410 shotgun my dad bought me.
Okay.
I believe at 14. I actually sold that. I kind of regret doing that because he bought it for me, but that was the first gun I ever owned myself, I guess.
And how old are you, good sir?
I'll be 30. Excuse me. I'll be in my 30s soon.
You're in the same boat I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long have you been in the firearms game? Let's just say.
So my dad took me to shoot when I was 8. That was the first time I ever handled a gun, and I believe he chose that age because when he was 8 years old, he actually got a 12-gauge shotgun to hunt because he grew up very poor, and there wasn't meat on the table unless he put it there outside of like holidays and stuff because they didn't have the money to spend on it. So there wasn't meat on the table unless he put it there. And he did that very young. So I think that's why he chose 8 to teach me to shoot. I wasn't really into guns so much until I was a little older because I think I was in Boy Scouts back when you could still be proud of it. And I got my rifle and shotgun merit badges. And I think that was when I really decided that I enjoyed shooting. And so I was young, didn't have any money, couldn't buy one even if I did. So I started like playing video games and watching videos and kind of just absorbing the information on various types of firearms. And it grew from there until I was eventually old enough to buy one. And as that was going on, I was slowly learning like the politics about guns and like various laws and so forth.
Right.
And then it eventually just kept growing to where I am now.
Right. Okay. Because currently, like right now, I am I would say my politics when it comes to guns is like totally far right. I am incredibly far right when it comes to guns because I know what it's like to have that right taken from me, and like a lot of the Eastern European countries, they know what it's like to have their rights taken from them. And I am a I fundamentally believe that you don't know what you have till it's gone. And as a result, I believe that people should have RPGs. Now, granted, not necessarily have access to the warhead per se, but like a dummy that fires, let's say, ball ammo, like paintballs or something. Something along those lines. Again, I see it as a platform, not necessarily as a actual weapon per se, but more of as a platform or a tool that could be used, similar to how we use the 40mm NATO grenade launcher could be used to fire a plastic slug at someone for pacification of crowds, let's say.
You know, you can actually get rocket launchers, right?
Not where I'm at.
Not where you are. Where I am, if I really wanted to lose money at rates never before seen, there actually is a way to get rocket launchers and like warheads and stuff, but you don't want to see the price tags. And it's next to impossible to find you somebody who will actually sell you one, but there actually are legal ways to obtain them.
Ooh, well, that's that's good to know. I mean, I personally wouldn't
mind. Destructive devices under the NFA are kind of the most restricted, but you can get like grenade launchers and rocket launchers. It's just like there's basically none of them out there on the domestic market because not many people have an interest in them. And the ammo, if you get actual explosive ammo, each one of those is registered as a destructive device. So on the cost of the ammo, which is already very expensive, you have to register that device as a destructive device, and that's an additional $500 tax on top of all of it. So it's absurdly expensive, and that's why there's basically nobody out there that does that. But there actually are legal ways to get them.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
If you live in a state like mine that doesn't give a shit what you own. But where you live, I don't imagine that California allows people to have NFA items at all, yet alone destructive devices.
They won't
Actually, hold on. I heard you guys can have Curio Relic NFA devices only. And there's also additional restrictions. I don't think you can have full auto Curio Relics. I think they can only be the lesser NFA items. But don't quote me on that. I'm not a lawyer, and I have no idea of the full extent of California laws. But in fairness, neither do the judges or the lawyers there. So
yeah, honestly, I personally, when it comes like just to chat a bit now, because I guess we're in the part like if anyone wants to ask any questions, you can do that. I will gladly read them off for you. Just stay on topic if you can.
I'm a retard on the internet, but I'll give you my best retarded answer.
All right, man. Well, I'll just say, when it comes to Creo relics, you can. Well, actually, not gun laws. Yeah, when it comes to gun laws here, I really don't like them simply because I feel like I'm being intellectually dishonest with the police. Like it's sort of like I feel like I'm talking to a fucking Muslim half the time. Like they're practicing taqiyya on me. Like I'm not searching you, officer. Or I'm not searching you, civilian. I'm checking you for weapons. Oh, that's not a rifle, even though it fires an intermediate cartridge. It's not. It has the AR platform, which is, let's just say, it is a rifle. It's not. But it's a pistol because it has a grip and all this. Like, it's getting to the point where it's so semantic that we're basically in fantasy land, and even like, it's like the emperor has no clothes almost. That's why I don't like these gun laws. I wish we could just do away with all of them, and then if we wanted to, if we really, really had to, put them back on as we go. And that's assuming we want to put them back on. I want full auto. I learned the other day from a gun owner, gun channel. You named a few channels. I'll name one here. Reno May. He's a good. I guess he's up in Northern California, Northern Bay. He talks about types of gun briefings and things such as that. And he talked about, what I was going to say. There's Franklin Armory that has a Title I gun where it's not a pistol, but it's not an AR, and it's basically an other rifle. So like we can have AR.
It's considered a quote firearm, which is like the last catch-all in the NFA, because when they were writing it, they didn't really know what they were writing about, but they knew that there would be guns that like didn't meet any of the other definitions. So it's a firearm and it has straight lines and grooves. It has advantages and disadvantages, mostly disadvantages. Like it requires special ammunition to be effective after so many feet. But Franklin made it as a way of like sticking it to the NFA, which I think a lot of people didn't appreciate. Because now there's this gun out there it's basically SBR length, but it's not an SBR. So it makes people question, well, why do we even have these laws?
Well, that and also the fact that it's bolt action. It's a bolt action AR pistol. But here's where it gets interesting. People have swapped out the upper on the AR, making it so that it could basically be no longer bolt action but semi-automatic. So I don't know. I wouldn't do it honestly. When it comes to stuff like that, I just don't even want to get into that boat. I'd rather just have something that I know that we can all agree is in the commons, and we all can agree this is a rifle, this is a gun, this is a pistol, this one's for fighting, this one's for fun. But at the end of the day, like when we started getting into these weird semantic games with the police almost always win, and it's one of those instances where I don't like it. So I don't get
so when it comes to police and gun laws or weapon laws in general, unless the officer himself is a gun guy, they're probably not going to know what the laws are. And even if they are a gun guy, they're not lawyers. Their job isn't to sit down and read the law and comb through it, so they don't really know it all. So they're going to go based on what they know or what is expected out of them as far as enforcement. And culturally, our society is, if there's two people arguing over something and one's a cop, a lot of people will just automatically defer to the officer because he is an authority figure.
Right.
So he gets the benefit of a doubt, whereas you're going to have to prove your case.
Yeah. All righty. Any other questions? Do you have any questions, Luke, for Wolf?
No, it's been very insightful.
That's good
well,
to know.
This is one of those topics you can sit down and read about all day, but in the prepping community, there's a lot of it's kind of like it was before all this, it was kind of like a game to like show off of how prepared you were. And most people do like, it's gadgets and gear and stuff. And don't get me wrong, that's cool. You want good gear, but what I'm going to tell you is prepping's not really that glorious. It's stuff like, having an emergency plan for whatever emergency you want to think. Like if they're like where you live, let's say there's a wildfire gets out of hand and it starts sweeping through town. What's your plan to get out and avoid it? It's mundane things, just like buying a little bit of extra food that stores, like canned goods. It doesn't have to be dry store. The advantage to dry store is it's compact, it's lightweight, it's easy to go take it and go on the go with it. It's just getting skills. Like I recommend camping. Go out and start recreationally camping. Maybe do like a weekend trip, but only bring enough food for one day, and like have some like read up on your area on stuff you can forage and find for food. And maybe the second day before you go home, you try to live off the land. And because worst case scenario, you go hungry that day, but you get a burger on your way home.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like.
And on that, try to get into shape, because if you're huffing and puffing on your way to the fridge, you're going to be in a lot worse state than if you're somebody that hikes regularly.
Well, I'm overweight, but that's only by design simply right now because I'd rather have a little bit of extra fat on me. But every other day I walk 12 miles. I actually have like a Fitbit, and I actually calculate, and I've walked 26 miles before between let's say California, San Jose, and it's San Jose and Gilroy, let's say, because I knew that according to my history of my state, there were two different missions set up by the conquistadors, and they were supposed to be one-day horse ride away from each other, and I was just walking between different areas. And I knew there wasn't going to be. I was going directly to from San Juan Bautista to Santa Clara, so I knew that my house was down the way. I just had to walk, and just walk, and I did it. Wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm fairly in shape. I can't run very fast. I don't know if that's what you're referring to when it comes to being in shape, but I could definitely just keep going.
Well, just shape in general, mostly endurance. So, like, if you can walk long distances, that's a great boon. You hate doing it, but if we're, let's say, like, this pandemic actually turned out to be way more deadly and stuff was just shutting down because there was nobody there to actually maintain the infrastructure. At some point, gasoline's just totally gone. And all that's probably going to be around is like diesel stores. But if you don't have access to a vehicle, you're going to have to walk it or you're going to have to ride a bike. You know, that's like I said, like into the world events is not very likely. What's more likely is short-term destabilization and at worst, political, upheavals or like changing of society. Like worst case scenario in the near future is going to be that we may face some sort of police state. And that's going to greatly impact your quality of life and your freedom of movement. And I like to say people on the right are kind of lawful stupid. You could ban breathing and most would pass out.
Yep.
But don't go out and commit crimes. I can't advise you that. But having an understanding of how the underground works is a great thing to know, even if you don't ever use it.
The underground?
Yeah, if you understand how, black markets and stuff work, say that worst case scenario, the commies do win and we start living, suffering, and dying under communism.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've noticed, and it's really hard to actually read up on black markets, but something I've noticed about Eastern Bloc countries is people there, if there's a law they don't agree with, they just ignore it. And that kind of comes from when they lived under communism, where if you were a good communist and you followed all the rules, it was very likely you and your family died because things like food were so hard to get and there was so very little wealth that most people turned to black markets and smuggling and stuff in order to just survive. Right. And so that kind of became ingrained into Eastern European culture that, it's some, corruption here is viewed as bad, as we should, but over in Eastern Europe, corruption is not necessarily viewed as something that's inherently bad. It's kind of a gray area where it depends on the type, because so many people had to resort to crime just to survive in the Soviet days.
Right. Okay. So I guess another thing I would ask when it comes to food preparation, how long can, let's say, a can of tuna last? I have stuff that's dating back to 2013 even. It's not open, but I still have it because I just stack and I keep it just in case. I've always been frightened of botulism and things such as that. What would you recommend to people who have, let's say, a little bit of expired rice or expired beans or expired tuna or canned goods? Should they throw it out or should they keep it?
All right, so canned goods, if the can's in good shape and it's not dented, in theory, most canned goods, unless they'll say, canned goods have expiration dates and sell-by dates and stuff, but in theory, most canned goods last a lifetime. They'll last a very long time. If you open it up and it's mush or it doesn't smell right, I'd toss it. But for the most part, the date on the can doesn't really matter. Now, when it comes to canned goods, you want to rotate them through, they're part of your everyday food supplies. But in theory, the stuff in the can should last longer than you. When it comes to dry stored rice and beans, as long as you're storing them correctly, they last a very, very long time. I can't really give you a date. But a lot of times it'll be if they go quote bad, it's going to affect the flavor, but you should be fine to eat them. I mean, it's not going to be something you're going to enjoy.
One of the things I've I personally have picked up is I learned how to make jerky, and I have a jerky machine to make jerky, and I know how to make jerky. I have a recipe for it. Another thing I've heard is a concept of hardtacks. Do you know what a hardtack is?
Yeah, it's great for busting your teeth.
Yes, it is. Yes. But for those of you who don't know what a hardtack is, basically what it is it's just a really, 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 really hard, dried out saltine cracker. And those they have some from like the Revolutionary War that if you keep it in the proper conditions, bugs don't get to it. You could still eat it. Just liquefy. Yeah, there you go. There's a hardtack. Would you recommend people learn how to make those? Assuming, or just for the, just for like the lulz one day, oh, we have extra money. Let's try to make hardtacks.
All right, so this is actually something. When it comes to like making your own food and storing it for a long time, I would do research into like what pioneers did in food preservation and what they used to do historically, because that's hard. That's theoretically edible, by the way, but I wouldn't eat it even if it was new. It doesn't have a great reputation of being very tasty or enjoyable. So, but yeah, like a channel I've been watching lately is called Townsend's, and he does a show where he goes through historical dishes and how they were made, and it's kind of been something I've been watching as both a way of getting an appreciation of what people used to live through, as well as some of their older food preservation techniques. Because you can, if you don't have access to modern things, you can just kind of default back to what people used to do. And like, it's also helped me in my daily cooking since, because of all this lockdown stuff. At first, I learned how to do a lot of home cooking. Like, I know how to make bread now. And watching a lot of like these old dishes, they would reuse like leftovers of previous meals, or if bread went stale, they would incorporate that into another dish, and it helps make your food go a lot longer. On food, I kind of view it as like different layers of desperation. So at first, I'd recommend like cleaning out your fridge and freezer, and then start going into your dry store food. And then like as you go down, like the more hungry you are, the more like accepting you will be of lesser foods like hardtack. So unless you're like traveling, I would start with the other kind of food stores first, because you like, people go on about survival, but a lot of part they don't tell you is part of your survival is morale, right? So if you don't have the will to go on, you're not going to do as well as if you're a lot happier, I guess, for lack of a better term. So having food, like when you dry store, go ahead and spend the extra money to get the better tasting food, and do try it. Make sure it's something you're going to eat and enjoy, because that little bit will help give you a rest mentally and help you go on in a bad situation. As well as if you do have buddies, you're planning like, hey, if things go bad, we're going to head off to, like, say, the Lost Coast of California.
Okay.
As just a an idea of where to hang out while things simmer down. Take like some playing cards with you. Know how to play some games and stuff. Hell, maybe even a tabletop RPG with some pen and paper, just to like keep your spirits up. Because a lot of this in a survival situation is just going to be the mental toll it's going to take on you. Because you can survive in pretty bad conditions with very little resources. I know people don't think about it that way, but like a lot of it's going to be in your head.
Right. Okay.
I mean, actually, a show I actually would recommend, if it's still on, or you can catch reruns of it, is Naked and Afraid, just because it's people like dropped out in the middle of nowhere and they cover different kinds of environments. The feminists hated it because women would often default into the homemaker role and like cook the food.
I remember that.
Yeah, they would like prepare or help purify the water and like cook the food, and the guy would often go out and get supplies, and then they would craft the various parts. Yeah, that show. But even the guys on that show that do better still end up losing tons of weight.
Yeah, because like right now I'm actually am overweight, but I could still walk as far as I have endurance. I don't have speed, I have endurance. And technically, I don't know if it's like a survival instinct or something like that, but I've been eating a lot more. I've been not like even though I've sacrificed food, it's the quality of food I get. I'm starting to pick up pizzas. So let's say I'm starting because they're cheaper. Like you can get $5 pizza. Like you spend $20 or $30, you get 6 or 7 pizzas. And yes, it's very cheap. It's not very healthy. I would not recommend it. You're going to get a lot of sodium. Oh boy. But I would recommend doing that for my own personal combined with
if you're
soup.
if you're stressed out, you do eat more, and they think that's like an instinctual response to difficulties because historically, any kind of situation that would stress people out would lead to lack of food. So they think that's like a survival mechanism to prepare your body for the stress that's going to come. But yeah, like this is a topic we could go on forever. So I've tried to kind of limit it to what's going on now.
Right.
And right now, I would think that would be short-term destabilization. Like where I live, people just won't tolerate it. And
Right.
I mean, Tim Pool did this video where he was talking about all these Democrats switching to Republican, and like almost all of them were in Indiana. And like he doesn't read his comments, so it's no point. But I'm like thinking to myself, it's like, Tim, you don't understand. Like here, all the Democrats are like business Democrats or blue dogs. They're already halfway conservative anyway.
Right. Because currently I'm looking at Tim Pool's channel right now, and apparently in San Francisco they want to change the fucking voting age to 16, and he's saying they should suffer the consequences if they do. Like honestly, if I get fired and I have a relatively good amount of money, I'm heading to Luke's. I'm getting the hell out of here. This is like, I don't.
There's enough crazy people in California that they make it miserable for the people who aren't. And I know there's a lot of people in California who do have the "this is my land" mentality, especially up north, and they want it to be better. I'm not really sure how to change that other than to maybe like just Northern California just to start setting up its own parallel government, and at some point just say, hey, we're not a part of California anymore. We're Jefferson, screw you.
Yeah, we're Jefferson, we're the new California Republic.
So yeah, put a second head on the bear just because, but
Yeah.
I don't, like I live in a 2A sanctuary county. We just all basically said, screw it, gun control doesn't matter anymore. And we're not the only one in Indiana. But I think as far as like politics going forward, it's just going to have to be your locality saying, look, this is the rules for our locality, screw you. Because that's what the left does, and they get away with it a lot. And I think like people, our big tent area over here are starting to realize that. So
Yeah.
my prediction for the future is going to be, it's going to be a lot of political moving and shaking, I guess. And you're going to have to learn how to play the game, so to speak.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be a forever thing. Not even the USSR was forever. It does eventually change and get better. I've talked to some Russians online, and not all of them are like, most of them don't really care for Putin, but there's like, they have a mentality of like, there's a game to play in the world of politics.
Right.
And like, when bad stuff happens politically, like bad laws and stuff, it's like, you don't advertise it, but you just kind of ignore it and do the best you can to get around it.
Right. All right. That being said, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. We've been going on for some time now. Let's see, how long have you been going for?
Yeah, at some point we're gonna have to say, that's enough for now, because this is a topic you can go on forever, and like, there's also like different kinds of scenarios you can prepare for. But as far as the rioting, I would say first off, train, get basic skills. Go camping. If your plan is to get out, and if you live in a big city, I would say if it's all hell breaks loose, it's probably better to get out than stay. if you do intend to stay and defend what's yours, you got to be really smart about it. Like we saw with the what happened up in Kenosha, like people will sell you out before they even know what was going on. So you're going to have to be in the position where it's very clear that you're in the right. Don't go looking for trouble.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you now, like, you may have to do things that are going to haunt you forever. If you decide to do that, those are decisions. I can't tell you not to, because my mentality is, this is my town, this is my home, I will defend it. But
Yeah.
you're going to have to, it's going to stick with you forever. And if you think, oh, that's not going to bug me, no.
Easier said than done.
It will. But my advice really is, getting some some baseline good health. Motorcycle.
Yep.
Training is more important than gear. So if a lot of like trainers who do it for a living, of course they're going to say this, but they're honest, no bullshitting advice is, between buying lots of guns or training, go for a few guns that you're going to know that they're reliable, that you're going to know how to use, and invest more into training, because that matters much more than having a bunch of toys, right?
Yeah.
So when the COVID stuff hit, me and my friends, we did an audit of what all we had, calipers and what we had, and we realized that most of what we owned, they're like collector items around 100 years old, and some of them can still serve. They're fine rifles, but we all kind of looked around at each other and decided that there was going to be like a set of calibers that we all agreed on, so that we could share ammunition supplies, preferably magazines as well. And they were more modern and up to current standards. They weren't as obsolescent. So
Right.
something I'm going to work on in the near future is to get a double stack Glock alike, either a P80 or what the new PSA is going to be, or something along those lines, to have a modern double stack handgun. And the rest of the people I'm with are going the same route. And we want to be able to share ammunition on it and so forth.
Right. All right. All right. That I think that's good enough for now. All right.
As far as channels, I recommend Military Arms channels for reviews. Tim, who runs the channel, he'll give you straight answers on any new gun that comes into the market. He's not loyal to any companies, so you can trust him for honest reviews. As far as and it's not his main focus, but he does do videos on things for like armor, and various philosophies in actual gunfighting. I recommend Grantham. He's a veteran, but he's not a veteran that's full of shit. And he will tell you what he thinks the weapons he reviews, how they hold up today compared to modern fighting standards. He'll give you advice on how to wear your armor and lay it out, various clothes to wear. And while you're there, leave a homoerotic comment. Don't even question why. Just do it. It's tradition. It's tradition.
Okay.
You have to tell Plaid Daddy how sexy he is. Just do it.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. It's funny. We can get more freaking views for that. What the hell?
Don't question it. Just do it. Other than that, it's going to get more specific. As far as protecting your Second Amendment going forward, I recommend GOA. There's also the Second Amendment Foundation. They do a lot of heavy lifting. GOA is non-compromise. If you're saying, hey, I don't think people should own machine guns, just remember, if they're going in saying we're no compromise, they're going to keep the line and progress gun rights more than if they go in and say, here's what we're willing to give up.
Yep.
And GOA is growing pretty heavy. Unfortunately, the NRA has kind of become the personal piggy bank for Wayne LaPierre, and it's in a lot of trouble, mostly because it's going straight into his pocket. And the NRA has supported gun bans in the past, and they support red flag laws. So they're not in a lot of people's good graces right now in the Second Amendment area. But like the GOA publishes their finances, so you can see how much everybody makes and what they spend it on.
That's good.
And
I'd recommend that.
Should something happen to the NRA, we need an organization that'll step up to the plate, and I think GOA will do that. But Second Amendment Foundation does a lot of good work on the court front. There's also the Firearms Policy Coalition. There was some internet drama recently regarding some of the people that ran it. I don't know if that is, but you may also look into them and see if that's an organization you would like to give money or be a part of. I've given money to all three. I'm on all of their mailing lists, but GOA is the one I kind of like stick the back with the most. And also look into your local organizations. A lot of them will have like a charter of what their values are, and you can look into their history. And local fights are very important going forward. They've learned that like a lot of people don't support federal level stuff, but a lot of state level stuff will get passed.
My a question I have for you: would you recommend? Because I know I've watched a lot of gun channels like what's it, Iraq Veteran 8888. I've watched him. I've watched I watch I guess another prepper channel would be Rule the Wasteland. I guess it's called rulethewasteland.com. I watch him. I actually seen him pop up in Beckloff's chat, Forney's chat at some points. I don't know like what like he personally was doing there. But in essence, one of the things I've noticed is, well, I'm trying to think of what I was originally saying. When it comes to, I don't know. I don't know. I guess. Oh yes, that's right. Gun self-defense insurance. I'm seeing a lot of people push that around lately. Like if you get in a fight with, let's say, somebody and they decide to try to attack you, and you're in the right no matter what, you shoot the enemy, kill them. They have Second Amendment insurance essentially. Do you think that is a legitimate thing, or do you think that's a scam or a grift?
Right. So the organization going around, the big one, the name escapes me.
USCCA.
Yeah, they are reputable. I knew somebody. He's passed away now, but he had their insurance. They will cover other things other than self-defense shooting. Like he had his guns confiscated at one point by an officer, and they helped him get it back. And in fact, they actually did that for free on him. I don't know if that's something they'll always do, but they are good. And given the way some DAs have been, like we saw with the McCloskeys, even though they were totally in the right, other than some poor muzzle discipline, you know, they've still got like ran through the ringer in the book thrown at him. So I would recommend it. It's not really that expensive. You know, where I live, my state is more concerned about was it justified or not. And sometimes if the police determine it's justified, they won't even press charges. I mean, I'm not saying we're running around shooting everybody. That doesn't happen. But
right, of course.
My state's, you know, we have a very self-sufficient attitude out here, and there's certain norms and unwritten social pacts and stuff. So we're more self-defense friendly, but not every state is. And especially if you're in a state that's more critical of like any self-defense, I definitely go ahead and sign up.
All right. So yeah, because I'm looking at this and it's like $47 a month for their elite membership. And that's like, again, I'm at least getting the platinum membership when I get my next paycheck, or the next paycheck when I start my next pay cycle. I'm definitely picking this up because I'll tell you, I would imagine there's going to be a lot more Machiavellian sort of like Game of Thrones levels of preparation that needs to happen, at least in my area, because we can't just kill each other like civilized people. We have to stab each other in the back and get other people to do it for us. So having the pen as well as a sword is very important on my end, at least right now.
Yeah. As far as food preparation goes, I think that's pretty mainstream now. I've noticed in a lot of like big box stores, they now have dry store food just as a regular item. So that's going to be a lot easier. And most things are short term. So they say like to be totally prepared, it's like 5 years of food. That's not really practical for most people. I would say a few months worth of food if you plan to stay to kind of get you through the rough patch and get something set up. And something about food, by the way, is the servings they give you is like based on a 2,000 calorie diet for how many people it says. And that's like your regular sedentary daily life. So if you're doing more, you're probably going to consume way more calories, and it's probably going to be anywhere between like a half to a quarter of what it actually says. If you talk to guys in the military, they eat like tons of calories a day and they still lose weight. And that's because they're exerting themselves so much.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Right. Because I've seen some channels where they say you need to just eat as much as you can, like they're going to take it away from you, because they will.
That's actually, when it comes to food stores, don't advertise that you got them. Because like FEMA has basically declared that it has the right to confiscate all of your food supply and redistribute it as they see fit in an emergency. So don't like
Marxism.
Yeah, that's been around for a while, because at one point the government went, all these prepper people, they've got like tons of food built up. Well, we can just go and confiscate it in an emergency and distribute it. And so like going forward, I'm just going to say, like, the government's not really on your side. Like, I posted a video to both your Discord and Becklov's of some people going around and, like, beating Antifa up because they're just tired of it. And the cops arrest them, and they're like, well, we're on your side. These people assaulted us. We're on your side. The government's on its own side. It's its own faction. So they don't really care about you as an individual person. They only care about their numbers and approval and what they can manipulate you with.
Yeah, so we're basically having to fight a civil war, while we're avoiding the guards of it's like a gang war.
So like, Trump's been a net positive to this country, but I don't consider Trump to be on my side, so to speak. So I know a lot that kind of is a controversial thing, but the government is its own faction. Remember that. And kind of what we're seeing is the old establishment with the neocons and the Democrats is on its way out, and that's why they're doing all this crap. And they're being replaced with the new Trumpian establishment, which has been a net positive for the country. Don't get me wrong. But that's the power struggle we're seeing unfold, and we're going to have that come on to us because we're the pawns in the whole scheme of it.
Yeah, I always thought we were. People oftentimes forget that they are pawns, but they're also the prize. No one wants to. I think it was Bill Whittle. I don't know if you watched Bill Whittle or not. He's a really good boomer conservative. I think he's one of the better boomer conservatives out there. He's definitely better than Glenn Beck. I think he's personally. Luke, would you say he's the spiritual successor to Glenn Beck? Do you think? Not Glenn Beck. Spiritual successor to Andrew Breitbart, do you think?
Closest thing we have, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ben Shapiro could have had that title, but he's too spurgy in that regard.
Yeah, he's a little spurgy. Okay, guys, can't do that.
Guys, we have to go to another war in the Middle East. Guys, we just need another war. Just one more.
Just one more. I mean, it's going to be fine, guys.
Just some more.
Bye, Gold.
Just some more blood and treasure. It's okay.
Here we are.
If we go to one more war, I'll pull that pineapple out of my ass and I'll stop frowning all the time.
God, yeah. So that being said, I think we're going to end it here. Go. Oh, actually, play it real quick. Play the clip. That's Space Boomer.
Really? That kind of casual violence, that sense of entitlement, that utter disrespect for the law or another human being, don't take my word for it. The evidence is right there in front of your eyes. That attitude has nothing to do with the police claim that he was charging the officer when he was shot.
He's somebody I would recommend. He has, I think, the firewall. Just type in Bill Whittle and you'll find him.
Yeah, he's still a boomer con, but he's one of the better boomer cons.
Right.
I think.
He's just disconnected.
And this latest outrage in Ferguson is yet another example, as if another was needed, among the economic wreckage, creeping totalitarianism, and foreign policy disasters, that he and his leftist cohorts would rather rule over ruins than disappear into the dustbin of history of a healthy and racially healed nation.
That sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah. Yep. So, ladies and I've already said final thoughts multiple times. Do you have any final thoughts, Wolf?
You know, book knowledge is great, but put it to practice first, especially while you have time to do it in a state of play. Because if anything happens, you're playing for keeps. So do it right now while there's no real lasting consequences. And get
Okay.
it done.
All right. And do you have a channel that I could chill for you, or?
I do have a channel, but it's not politic related at all, and it's not really like survival stuff. It's kind of a mixed bag channel I have on BitChute. So it's kind of, and I just kind of keep it unrelated to anything political I do.
Right.
Just because, like, when BitChute started up, it was all like fringe political stuff because that was who was getting kicked off first. And so I decided to make a channel that was just more my interest in non-politics to kind of help beef up the platform. And that's starting to spread out now more. It's starting to become more, casual engagement friendly, which is what you need for a platform to survive.
Right. Okay. Well, you could send me a link to that, and I'll put it in the description for those of you who want to follow. And I will. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, take care of one another. You're playing for keeps, and remember, ladies and gentlemen, saving the West is a side quest. This is the Digital Renegade podcast. Out.